Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Once More with Feelings. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Beth, and we are an emotional journey podcast in which we watch movies and we talk about how we feel. Today we're going to be talking about The Shining. It's a 1980 psychological horror film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick and co-written by novelist Diane Johnson. It's based on Stephen King's novel of the same name and stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, and Scatman Crothers. The film presents the descent into insanity of a recovering alcoholic and aspiring novelist who takes a job as a winter caretaker for a haunted mountain resort hotel with his wife and clairvoyant son. And that is from Wikipedia.
And joining us this week for this very special episode is Polly Schattel. I said that right?
You did say it
okay,
right.
Good, because I had asked Beth and I couldn't remember.
Tell us about yourself, Polly.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me. I love what you guys do. I love your work, so I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Awesome.
I am a writer and a filmmaker. I've written a couple novels, made a couple movies, writer, director. I'm one of those people who's critically acclaimed, but is not selling a ton of copies. I'm not, rich yet, put it that way. But I do okay, So it's been a real fun journey telling, I'm a storyteller in various forms. And I am a lifelong student of The Shining. And I appreciate you guys having me and letting me choose the movie this time.
Awesome.
I'm glad that you picked this movie, mainly because I never would have picked it. It's not something that stands out to me as when I saw it, I was very young. It was one of those things I just didn't understand. I don't have that kind of hierarchy in my mind of the psychological part of it. It doesn't resonate with me. So it took me a very long time to understand this was supposed to be scary. The scariest part was all about the abuse, the implied abuse to the child, because I was a child of abuse. So it was hard for me to watch it. And that's the only thing that really resonated with it. I actually did not even know that The Shining was talking about clairvoyance.
Yes.
That completely eluded me as a child. I get it now, did not get it then.
I know for me, I don't think I saw it until I was in my 20s, because when it came out, I think I was 6. So when I was a teenager, obsessed with Stephen King books. I mean, up to a certain point, I think I'd read the same, 6 or 7. I love the Dark Tower series. I have not finished the Dark Tower series, but I love
I think you're better off on that one.
Probably, and
I know the feeling. You're waiting for it. You don't want it to go away. You want to still have more to read.
Exactly, and I think the last one I read was the Song of Susanna, and I'm like, I just can't anymore because I don't want to finish it. And I feel like that with a lot of series.
I get it.
But I remember seeing this movie and thinking, if you take out the supernatural and you take away the Stephen King of it, this would be a good psychological horror movie without because you don't really need the supernatural of it.
That's right.
But
I think a lot of Stephen King tends to be that way, though.
But if you're, like I said, taking the Stephen King out of it, though, too, because, really, it's Stanley Kubrick's movie. It's Stephen King's basic story, but it's Stanley Kubrick's movie. But unfortunately, my whole outlook on this became very tainted when my true darling, when I found out that Shelley Duvall and how hard it was for her, because she was one of my favorite people from a very young age. I grew up with fairy tale theater, and I remember seeing Popeye as a very young kid. So I tend to get a little grudgy about that with people. I'm like, you hurt my people. She was my girl, and you upset her. And so I've always had a bit of a hang up with that. With this movie. But I tried to be open-minded this time. But I do have, my personal feelings was apprehension, because I can read a scary book, but I don't want to say I hate, because there's a lot of scary movies I like, but I don't actively go for scary movies.
Sure.
I was overwhelmed. I remember that too, because I was kind of like excited, but overwhelmed about seeing a novel that I knew and cared for come to life. Little disappointed when it wasn't exactly what I thought it was supposed to be. So there is that upset. But yeah, and annoyed a little bit too, because I think that kind of followed through with a lot of my favorite Stephen King stuff later on when I saw Maximum Overdrive and I was like, what? And even then,
Running Man must have really
Running
pissed
Man,
you
no.
off.
Well, no, not even. No, The Lawnmower Man pissed me off because that was a short story.
That was completely wrong.
That had nothing to do with anything. And Stephen King even had to get his name taken off of it because they would just basically flip the table with that one.
Yeah.
So how did you come into this movie, Polly?
Okay. It's a long story. I'm a little older than you guys. And what happened was I was in 8th grade when my generation, my friends and I discovered Stephen King. And the first book we all read, which we passed around like crack to 8th graders, was Night Shift.
Oh, wow.
And it was about it was the school year of 79 and 80. So quickly I read Night Shift, fell head over heels in love with it, read Salem's Lot next, fell head over heels in love with it, even though I readily admit I didn't get most of it because I was too young. And then, of course, I read The Shining. And same thing, I loved it. Scariest book I'd ever read, probably still the scariest book I've ever read. But I didn't understand. There's a lot of stuff going on, psychological stuff I didn't get. But I got the big picture of the hotel, the ghosts, the angry father with failed career, all of this stuff, resentment toward the family. But that summer, there was a movie out. And I got a chance to go see The Shining first run in the theater.
Oh, wow.
And I'd never heard of Stanley Kubrick. I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't know this guy was a legendary filmmaker. I just knew The Shining, one of my favorite books, and I could go see it in the theater. And my mom and I went and saw it. And interestingly, it so unnerved my mom, she had to get up halfway through the movie and leave. She left.
Wow.
Yeah. And I sat and watched the rest of it by myself. I was like a 12-year-old boy sitting watching The Shining by myself in the theater. Mm-hmm. And you know, The Shining's weird because it's called a horror movie, but I think you guys touched on something there. It's not really that scary.
No.
It's not. It's more dread. It creates this deeply enveloping dread, you know, this psychological realism of this abusive father, you know.
I think it's highlighted a lot by the discordant tones that they use in the movie, just to like the chalkboard nail scratch.
Yeah.
We were talking about that the lack of any type of underscore definitely sets the feeling, and then it's not music, it is these discordant tones that they do throw through it that do put you on edge.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, a lot of people, when it came out, I mean, every Stanley Kubrick movie bombs when it comes out because all the critics are expecting a jaw-dropping masterpiece. All the audiences are expecting the next Clockwork Orange or 2001. Mm-hmm. And when it came out, it bombed, and critics hated it famously. And then, weirdly, and they were saying Stanley doesn't understand horror. He's a rational man who doesn't understand the intuitive darkness of horror movies and what they represent. And I would argue something very different. I would argue that he painted such a you know, it's like a puzzle that takes us years and years and years to figure out. And eventually the public catches up to where Kubrick himself was, and we figure it out. Now it's 40 years, maybe, you know, so many years afterwards. And we're just now, through a lot of the scholarship you see on YouTube and in journals, we're just now kind of catching up to what Kubrick's real intentions with The Shining was. There's kind of a, you know, it's not a secret anymore, but for a long time it was like there was a secret about what was the true subject of The Shining. Like, what is The Shining really about? I mean, we know it's about a haunted hotel and a marriage falling apart, but what is it about, like, thematically? And once you start going down those rabbit holes, for lack of a better word, things get really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. And, The Shining, of course, was the subject of its own documentary called Room 237, where basically the documentary explored, I think it was 5 different theories about the film and what exactly is going on in the film. And some of those 5 theories, it's kind of meant to be like, oh, there's so many strange ways you could look at this. And some of them are presented for comic effect. Like, there's a whole wing of fans that think it has to do with, like, the moon landing, and Kubrick actually shot the moon landing, and the little boy's wearing a shirt with a Apollo 11 on it. And so Kubrick is tipping his hat that he actually shot the moon landing. That's all bollocks. Oh, yeah. That's rubbish. But there is a couple of those theories have their roots in truth. And it's a deeply humanistic, compassionate film, believe it or not. And I do want to talk about the Shelley thing, because I think the Shelley thing is at heart here. There's a lot going on in this movie. It's a deeply compassionate, humanistic, and I would even call it a feminist film. But you got to go with me to let me explain it, because it's a very deep explanation.
Because we've already kind of posited that it's most likely not going to pass the Castellini test. But you'll understand. But you'll understand why.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Explain that test a little bit to us.
So usually at the end, and we can do it now, it's not a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
The Castellini test, it is a tongue-in-cheek test.
Yeah.
Brie never intended for this. Brie Castellini, who developed the test, never intended for it to be an actual test of feminism. It was a response to the Bechdel-Wallace test, which is often used, which was also tongue-in-cheek. But she wanted something that actually maybe defined it more inclusively than the very strictures, the very strict areas of the Bechdel-Wallace. So there's 3 rules, and of course, you still use your own logic to
we squint sideways a lot of times on these.
To inform it. But number 1, there have to be at least 2 named women characters with at least 5 lines of dialogue each. Number 2, those characters must have a conversation, not necessarily with each other, either not about their partner or with their partner, future or current, and not about their relationship.
Okay.
Number 3, at least one of the women has to be integral to the plot, meaning that if she were written out of the film, it could not reach its same ending.
Right.
And surprisingly, there are a surprising number of movies in which we thought would fail and actually passed.
Yes.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
And then there's ones where we think are going to pass, and then when we start to break it down, we're like, oh, well, shit, it doesn't. Yeah.
So let's maybe just go over it and see what you think. We can do this at the start, and we can talk about the film afterwards. So, number 1, there have to be at least 2 named women characters with at least 5 lines of dialogue each.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard because the movie is like a enclosed atmosphere. There's only 3 main characters in the whole movie.
Oh, yeah.
The whole point of the movie is isolation, psychologically as well as fundamentally.
That's right. Yeah. So that's a little bit, I guess you could call the doctor in the movie another female character, and she's actually pretty integral to the thing.
She does have more than 5 lines.
She just shows up briefly, And but I would. It's important to remember here that the entire movie is posited on the fact that there is an innocent little boy in danger, and his mother is doing every single thing she can to save him.
Oh, definitely.
And I think a lot of people they misunderstand that. They look at it as if, she's presented misogynistically because she's not a strong woman. She's not the lady from the Terminator who kicks everybody's ass and flips Jack Nicholson's over her shoulder. And she's actually terrified, probably like a normal person would be in that situation. So she has agency, I guess is my point. Her actions, she saves her kid. At the end of the day, she saves her kid. That's all we need to really talk about, because she does it. She repels the monster, so to speak, and goes and gets the snowcat and gets the kid out of there.
And oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was going to say, we were joking about, like, in the beginning when they're like, can you show Mrs. Torrance the kitchens while we go and do manly things? You know, we were joking around about that, but it was filmed in 78 and 79. So that really, you know, you have to kind of put that lens on it. It doesn't make it, you know, not misogynist, but it does make it perspective-wise that time
I try
period.
to avoid lenses, because when we say lenses, my whole issue with that, and it's going to be my overly developed sense of justice, is that when you view it through a lens, you're just saying, you're not saying it's okay, you're saying that it existed and we accept that, and I still do not accept that. I don't accept that the premise is patriarchy is a normality. Unfortunately,
it was a normality. And this is coming from my historian background of, you have to kind of look at things that are historical. So like when you're reading a primary document and you are reading about, you know, the savage people and how we met them and we try to show them our ways. We know as modern people that those things are wrong. Can we go back in time and change it? So when I say look at it through the lens of that time period, I'm not saying accepting it in any way, shape, or form. You just have to say, well, I can't do shit about it. It happened. I can't. There's no time. There's no time machine. I don't have a TARDIS to go back and say, knock it off. You know?
I told you it was overly.
I know. I'm just saying, but the historian in me has to do it that way.
I don't have an underdeveloped sense of justice. It's overly developed. I didn't say it.
No, I agree. Though I agree. I mean, what happened is what happened, and you know, I think you know, it's like when you talk about a movie like Gone with the Wind or something. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it's a magnificent movie. It's a movie of its time. And it's locked into that time, but that doesn't mean that we can admire it for what it, you know, how it has evolved through the years and how we have evolved through the years to look at it differently.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's one of the cool things about movies is every time you look at it, it changes, and it's not really the movie that changes. It's you that changes.
And with Gone with the Wind, that's almost like a double-edged, because you've got the time that it was filmed in, filming a time that was even worse.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Yeah,
it's like a double time machine.
Exactly, it's even worse.
So on the second item of the Castellini test is these characters must have a conversation, not necessarily with each other, either not about their partner or with their partner, and not about their relationship.
Technically,
Shelley Duvall did.
She talked with the doctor.
Have several conversations that were with her partner, but not about their relationship.
That is true.
Yeah, and obviously, the whole movie is, you know, if it is a horror movie, the horror there is the death of the child and death of the mother. So, you know, I think it's important to kind of pull back and look at the big picture and say that, you know, that's what I mean at its heart. It's a compassionate movie because Kubrick is very invested in making the mother, her survival, the key to the film. Either she wins or she loses. That's the real question at the heart of the movie. Either she's going to survive or she's not. And I think that's it's the right morals. You know, it's not about, you know, it's not a Tarantino-esque blowing everybody away on the screen and this almost cartoon violence. This is very real psychological torment this young lady goes through. And I think even to frame a movie in that way of just look at how awful this woman's experience is at its heart compassionate, because he could just gloss over it. He could have just ignored that aspect of it and just said, who cares, you know? But he does care. He does care about this character. And I think he recognized in her plight that there's a greater pattern to these things. And we'll get into this in a little bit if you want. But ultimately, the film is about genocide. And you can look at it on a macro level of genocide of an entire race, like the Jews or like Native Americans, which he references in the movie, or you could bring it down to the micro level and have it be the genocide, the murder, if you will, of a family. And Jack Nicholson is portrayed, his character Jack is portrayed as a racist. He is an abuser. He is a patriarch. He is a alcoholic. And so all of these things are posited as this is wrong. What's posited as right is the purity of motherhood and the survival of the family unit. And so that's what I mean when I get at the heart of it, that it's a very compassionate movie, because Jack, the bad guy, is everything you don't like. He's, like I said, he's racist. He's talking about the white man's burden, Lloyd, in the bar, you know? And there's a lot of little things like that. Like if you look at the dialogue and you think about it for a little bit, it opens up these little clues to the movie that you see are ways into the movie. Like, for instance, when Jack is throwing the tennis ball against the wall, a lot of people don't realize he's actually throwing it against this huge Navajo.
We actually did. We were commenting about, that's what she said. She's like,
I was upset about it.
First, she's like, you got to pay for all the damage you do. And then she's like, and you're doing it against that beautiful painting. You know?
Yeah. And the idea there is what is the disrespect
I was gonna say
Jack is showing to these native traditions. He basically has zero respect for them. He is an asshole.
Oh, no, he's supremely an asshole.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
He is not a likable character, even at the start. You get the sense that he is firmly a man of his time.
That's right.
A white man of his time.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. And that's really why Stephen King disliked the film, famously. King didn't like it. And because King, if you've ever read the novel is a very nuanced portrayal of this man who is a good father and his gradual descent into madness and cruelty.
Yes.
Whereas Kubrick started the cruelty right away.
Yes, we actually commented about that as well.
I was very surprised. My memory of it, I read the book when I was very young. I read it when I was 10 years old. I didn't understand all the nuance. And but I did understand the psychological struggles, or at least the basics of them. And then when I saw the movie this time, as opposed to when I was younger, I'm like, they bypassed all those psychological struggles. Because how do you show that? It's very hard to determine what's going on in someone's head without some kind of reenactment or some kind of projection of it. And I see that gradualness wasn't going to work for this film. There's no way. It was 2.5 hours already. Yeah. There's no way you can show that without going into a part 2.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of has what I have now become in my head as the Marauder's Map syndrome. So in the third Harry Potter movie, which we will not speak her name, but it is my favorite of the books and it is my favorite of the movies, based on many, many aspects between personal life and just enjoyment. But there's a scene in the movie that if you have not read the books, you don't get. And it's when Harry has the Marauder's Map, Snape gets him, Remus comes in, takes the map, drags Harry to his office, and doesn't even ask anything about it, just goes, Voldemort could, if in the hands of somebody bad, Voldemort could find you with this map. And you're like, but how do you know that it's a map, Moony? Because unless you've read the books, you don't know this. So it's the same kind of, it bothered me. What is Tony? Who is Tony? Why is Tony? And you don't know this in the movie. It's just a thing that is. Is the kid crazy? Is there really something helping him? Does he have DID where he's just at that moment he clicks out and Tony takes over? You don't know. So that's why I said the supernatural could totally be taken out of this movie, and it's still. We don't need to see the old lady. We don't need to see the guy getting the blowjob from the furry. We don't need to see any of the ghosts. And the movie would still hold true of this man slowly going crazy out of isolation. And his child has been a victim of abuse.
Yeah, no, that's very perceptive. I think Stanley himself said the only time in the whole movie where the supernatural asserts itself is when the ghost lets Jack out of the kitchen, out of the pantry.
Yeah, we were like, why is it?
I yelled fair. How unfair it was.
Yeah, because we were like, how unfair is that the ghosts are helping him get out, lock doors? Why is he not helping anybody else?
Well, for me as a kid and now, the time in which I went, oh, supernatural is actually being applied here, is when they have Scatman Crothers in the film.
Yeah.
Look at him and tell him he's going to offer him ice cream. And that's the premonition part where he's they're talking to each other without speaking.
That's right.
And the kid's still trying to define that. And I'm going, oh, this is the point where I decided, even as a child, this is the supernatural part, is that it's not just Tony so much as the kid has an ability to draw upon Tony.
That's right.
And to draw upon other people who also have the shining. Now, I don't remember in the book what Tony actually was supposed to be. Maybe a spirit of some kind?
Yeah, there's a toss-up between, from what I was reading. It has to do with, like, the grandfather's name and the dad's name is... So, I forget. It was, like, the grandfather's middle name was Anthony, and the dad's first name is Daniel Jack Torrance, and his name is Daniel Anthony. So, it's part of the also could still be DID. Or it's grandpa's ghost. There's so many different theories on what and who Tony is.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, the most convincing one I've heard, and I think this ties into Stephen King's sequel to The Shining, is called Dr. Sleep, which is actually a really good book, by the way.
I haven't read it, but now I want to.
It's pretty good. And a lot of people posit that Tony is actually Danny from the future, like he's
that was
adult.
One of the other yes.
It's like adult Danny warning child Danny is what probably it is,
and I think that's what they played with in the made for TV miniseries that they did with the dude from Wings,
Steven Weber.
Yes, I cannot remember his name. We just looked that up too, and Rebecca De Mornay. And because they kind of had like a spirit, so it wasn't the finger thing so much as a spirit that was kind of there for that talked to Danny, and they played with that being his future self. I was always disappointed in that version because of how cheesy it was, because I wanted it to be so good because they were promising. I remember they made a big thing about it, and even Stephen King released like backstory little snippets that we could get of the Overlook, and I remember like eating that stuff up and getting as much information as I could, looking forward to this miniseries, and then watching it going, oh my God, the topiary thing ghosts are like really bad. They're CGI nightmares. What the hell?
I mean, Stephen King's got a bit of a record with his miniseries that tend to be not great. I mean, The Stand, I think it had a lot of heart. I think The Stand had a lot of heart, but ultimately was a cheese fest.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And it too. I mean, Stephen King is a brilliant novelist, not so good as a filmmaker. No. Look at Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah.
That was that's going to be something we have to go through too. Maximum Overdrive. That would be a good film to try to delve into and try to get any deeper than Truck trying to drive you.
We'll have to do like the Stephen King season.
Cool. No, but so it's all very fascinating. I mean, I was going to say something, but it popped out of my head. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So on the final, which you actually already brought up, is at least one of the women has to be integral to the plot. Meaning if she were written out, it couldn't reach the same ending. And you already said it. Shelley Duvall's character, Wendy, if she was written out, that child would have died in the snow.
Totally. And Jack would still be crashing around the hotel all by himself.
Or he wouldn't have, he wouldn't have even gotten to the snow. Jack would have just killed him.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it's all, I mean, I don't know if if it's a woke film or whatever, but it is a compassionate, female-centered film in that the female concerns, mothering and nurturing and security and safety, are all foregrounded. And the major threat to those things is male rage, male anger, male vengeance, and so it holds up in my mind, So,
I see that, and I wasn't looking at that. I just remember again, mentioned with Shelley Duvall, and again, my heart goes out to her, and I know she was most likely already probably early on dealing with mental health issues and the triggers that he was probably pushing. I know that Scatman Crothers, he also was having issues with the repetitive takes, and Stanley Kubrick is notorious for taking so many takes. That when I was reading that when he did Bronco Billy with Clint Eastwood, and Clint Eastwood is notorious for one take,
that's right.
He actually burst into tears.
And I loved Bronco Billy. Just want to say that. I love that movie.
I will add it to the list I've never seen.
It's a good movie.
I've seen it. It's okay.
But I just...
It was different than what he had done before, so...
I think that instead of allowing her to reach her emotions, I think pushing her to reach those emotions was not the smart way to do it. So I will always have a lot of hangups about that. But I do appreciate what you're saying. I see the oppression of the feminism, the oppression of the female character through the male party. I like just when he goes into the ballroom, and it is mostly men. There are women, but they're arm candy, and they don't have any lines. There's nothing there for them, and it's all him. And I get that, and it is the husband who killed his wife and twins previously, and we made a comment. Who the hell was the Undertaker between then and now? But it's still
the caretaker. Yes.
The caretaker, not the Undertaker. But it's still. I mean, I hate to say it. It's not. I don't hate to say it. It's not my favorite movie because of my own hangups and issues. But I can see your point of view with it. I do see that it is about her survival to save her child, that mother instinct, the savageness that a mother can come up with and out of nowhere. Because I was joking about, oh my God, she's so tiny and she's dragging this big ass man across the floor. But then I said, oh yeah, well, it's probably her adrenaline fear.
Sure.
And she wasn't stupid about it. She drug him to a place she could lock him up.
Yeah, instead of just hitting him and then running,
if it wasn't
which
for
I would have done.
Damn ghost, she could have gotten away with it too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, there's none of that silly running and falling down, and none of those dumb horror movie decisions that people make. I mean, she did everything right. She was smart.
Except one thing, I would not have gone back to the rooms that I was in. You're
Really?
in a hotel. I would have taken my child and I would have run to a room that he would not have thought of.
Although when you're in fear, you run to what you know.
Yeah, but see that I would not have thought to put him in the freezer because of my fear of run. I would want to run, but I would, because of how weird I am, I would have randomly opened doors and then hid in a room with the door closed.
Well, in my mind, she was hiding in her apartment because they had food. Because eventually she's going to have, I think even in the book, they talk about that, where she has to sneak out of the room because they're hungry,
Oh, okay.
And so
it's been
she
years
went in
since
there.
I've read the book. Honestly, I was a kid.
Yeah.
Well, and also they did mention, and it's happened in there because he's got the raging fire in the one area, is that the heat is cut off everywhere but in that corridor.
That is true too. That is true.
So she would have run to what she knew. Her comfort was that apartment because that's where they were. And when you're hunting, you don't hunt outside of where the comfort zone of the animal is. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about prey, and prey reacts the way prey reacts.
I mean,
they
that's
run
true.
to what they know so that they can hole up. They don't run away from it. They run.
I still would have put things in front of the door.
Yeah, probably. But they did have a reinforced door, so it's okay.
Yeah, but that was not because of the. I did appreciate. Like I said, I love trivia about movies.
Oh, I set you up for that
yes,
trivia.
Yes, you did. And so I know that they at first had easier breakaway doors because they didn't think that Jack Nicholson was going to be able to do it, but not realizing he was a volunteer fireman, so they had to get reinforced doors. So it was 60 doors. Over a 3-day period. 60 doors he broke in over a 3-day period. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot of axe work.
So do you guys, I mean, can I address the Shelley thing?
Yes,
yes,
please,
absolutely.
please.
The Shelley fent in the room?
Yes. I love that.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, there's this whole kind of, you know, and it bloomed when the internet happened. There were a lot of assumptions and a lot of rumors about Stanley Kubrick. Most of them he planted himself. The guy was, if nothing else, he was a mastermind of public relations. And he was famously very secretive and wanted only the news to get out that he wanted to get out. So the news of, quote unquote, Stanley abusing Shelley, most of it is utter nonsense. And I say this as a feminist and as a person who thinks every woman should be listened to and most women should be believed. And I'm 100% behind all of that. But the apocryphal rumors that Kubrick abused Shelley are not true. And I will tell you why. First and foremost, I have to set it up in that Kubrick was an uncompromising filmmaker, and I'm including him with himself as well. He, like, the idea that you wouldn't get everything exactly right is just not part of his universe. I mean, he is every single movie he makes is down to the nth degree designed and perfected by him. And he actually, he died young because of that, because what happened was when he was shooting Full Metal Jacket, they were on a very toxic film set. If you remember Full Metal Jacket, the crumbling cities and stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, that was toxic. And he made him spend like 6 months out there. And it actually got in him, and that was part of he died at age 70. He died young. And even like Matthew Modine is said to have a permanent cough just from being in that environment for so long.
Oh, wow.
So when I say he's hard, and I don't want to give him a break because of that, but my point is he was hard on himself too. He didn't single Shelley out.
No, I'm not saying
abuse.
That he did. I'm just saying you have somebody who's probably already suffering. And to be that hard on anybody.
That's right.
I mean, she had nervous exhaustion and physical illness and hair loss. I mean, that's not good, you know? So to be that way on any person, regardless. So, I mean, I would have, if he had been that way with, you've got Jack Nicholson, who has, from what I've seen all across the board, is a no fucks given. I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what you're going to get. Because as much as I appreciate him as an actor, Jack Torrance and the Joker are practically the same guy, you know?
Yeah. That's
movie?
when Jack was really leaning into that kind of madness of his own character.
Yeah, I was joking around saying he acts with his eyes. It's all about the eyes and the eyebrows. I mean, he does. So you got that. You have, and I do know that Kubrick protected Danny, the actor, Danny Lloyd.
He did.
He did protect him. And I will give him that, because from what I was reading was that Danny Lloyd didn't even know he was in a horror movie. He thought it was a drama, which I'm not sure how you couldn't figure that out, kid.
Well, supposedly he figured it out about halfway through.
Okay.
He learned about halfway through that he was like, okay, this is not, love story I'm making here.
But I think it's easier to understand if you understand that, during the filmmaking process, this isn't all happening at one time.
No.
He gets one little scene, one little scene.
Oh, yeah.
One little scene.
That's
and
right.
they're broken down into these very technical, especially with Kubrick, very technical applied aspects of a scene in which he doesn't understand the context around those.
That's
and
right.
Especially as a child doesn't understand the context. When you see the playback, which I think are the dailies, I think then you could probably pull the context from it.
Right.
But how would you otherwise?
Yeah, and
as a
Danny
child, you're not going to get that.
And he even said he hadn't seen the movie uncut until he was like 11 years later. So,
Right.
yeah, that's when he put...
That had to be really fucked up for him. I mean,
would
just
imagine.
seriously, just even knowing that you did the film, it's different knowing that you did it.
And then
but then to
see
watch it as a whole and to understand what you were a part of,
that
had to really fuck with you. I feel bad for child actors a lot of times because as a child, you're already still trying to form your identity. And I'm not saying children shouldn't be actors. I'm saying they should have some kind of idea of what they're stepping into.
True.
Because you're dissecting your own personality to play something else. You cannot act without putting yourself into it somehow. So you have to find that part of you that fits it. It gets worse if it's something crazy. It gets worse if it's something bad. If there's something in there like that, you had to pull that out. And now you got to handle that like you're handling something radioactive. It's not isolated, or it's isolated. It's not covered by the lead shielding anymore of the rest of your personality. So when you do that, it's got to fuck with you. And there need to be, I think, better guidelines for children in acting so that, I mean, maybe there are now, but I think really even if you're playing a simple role, you're pulling out parts of your personality that are not meant to be separated without some kind of idea of what it means to do so. So that you have a way of bringing yourself kind of back. I think that's why a lot of child actors tend to have problems later on, is they don't get that care that's needed that adults can rebound from a little bit better because they've already formed their identities.
Right.
We were talking about that with Corey
Sorry,
Haim.
I kind of went on the
it's okay.
soapbox.
But we were talking about that with Corey Haim and Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
Because it's these, and you can even look in Drew Barrymore, and I mean, now she is overcome, but she had to go through a lot to get to where she is. The River Phoenix, these kids who get exposed to this lifestyle so young, they're not adults, and these child actors, Macaulay Culkin, he is my heart, and to see where he is now, it's like it makes me want to just hug him, and I don't even know him.
The children in the Star Wars sagas.
Yeah,
we're talking about
oh yeah, the little Anakin.
Yeah, we're talking about younger children who never got they didn't get, I think, the care that was needed specifically for them for the roles that they were in. And I'm not saying that's a fault of anyone. I'm saying it's a learning curve that once you know a thing, you should not ignore a thing.
And I think that there should be, if a parent wants their child to be an actor, there's a difference between the child wanting to be an actor. It could be a passion. It could be something learned. I used to do community theater, and there were so many children that just loved it. But I think when the parents push it, I think that there should be more advocacy in Hollywood for those children to just be like, you know what, your mom needs to go sit in the other room. She needs to go away for a bit. If you want to do this, fine. But maybe pass a test or something to show that you are mentally competent to raise this child in this environment. Because if you're not, then your child cannot be a part of this.
There may be now.
There may be now. I don't know. We're looking at the
now.
past. We're looking at 80s, 90s. Actors that were child actors, and so it just as my own personal child advocacy that I am. Or advocate, sorry, I know words. I'm an educated person. But
I'm edumacated.
But as a child advocate that I am, it makes me angry to see these child actors. So I do appreciate that Kubrick tried to separate Danny Lloyd from a lot of the bullshit.
Danny has gone on record, he had a great experience and loved Kubrick, and he's delighted to be a part of this cultural phenomenon. He chose not to pursue a career. I think he was in one other movie, and then they were just like, yeah, we're done. And he went on to he lives in Kentucky, and he's like a teacher at a community college now.
Awesome.
and he's really a sweet guy. Like evidently he'll go to cons and stuff, and he's super sweet and super nice. And the twins, the two girl twins, the sisters, Louise and Lisa, I think Burns, they're super nice, and they're all one cozy family.
That's
like
cool.
they're all still in touch and stuff. So yeah,
I always cheer for the child actors.
Oh, yeah.
I always cheer for them when they do well with their lives outside, or even in Hollywood, but outside of it, like Dana Gould. Like I was so sad for her. I was so sad for all these children that don't seem to make it out of the machine.
Yeah.
But when you see those, like the I forget the child from Leave It to Beaver, he does stained glass. That's his whole life. He does stained glass now.
Yeah.
Or he has done it for years.
And the one he was a police officer.
Yeah, a police officer.
And he was in the LA riots.
So, I like it when someone makes it out or continues a career and makes it, out of that psychological issue that tends to grab so many child actors. I know we're going far afield
right now. That's
okay.
Right, I mean, it's still our feelings, it's still relevant.
Have you guys, this is off topic a little bit, but have you guys seen that documentary about the 90s TV show? You Can't Do That on TV or whatever.
Oh, yes, the one about Nickelodeon
stuff. And it's horrifying. And you see poor Amanda Bynes.
Oh, now Amanda Bynes, yes. No, she's definitely... there's a lot. It breaks my heart to see her as well. I see her on TikTok a lot, and it really, because it's like the potential of this young lady,
brilliant.
Amazing.
She still is brilliant, but she's been broken so inevitably
but I don't
by
know,
this process.
I don't know how much of that documentary is legit. Now, I'm not saying that a lot of the stories that aren't true. Like I firmly believe that Drake Bell went through a lot of shit as well.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of controversy right now about the way the documentarians went about getting the information that leaves a lot of questions.
Oh, when they trapped Mark Summers.
Yeah, they trapped Mark Summers into it because he wanted, when he found out about what was going on, he was like, I don't even want to be a part of this because they brought him in. He thought he was just going to talk about the old days on Nickelodeon. And then when they started asking him leading questions, he was like, I'm out of here, deuces. So I don't know how, I'm not I'm not going to say that I am 100% right because I don't want people to come at me, but also I would question some of it.
I think you should question anything because you don't know the truth of anything, but you can make,
that's right.
You can formulate opinions.
Do I think that dude's a creeper? Oh, hell to the yes. What's his face? He was on, I loved the show Head of the Class. I freaking loved it. And that's where I remember him from. I can't think of his name at the moment.
Oh, the guy from Better Off Dead?
Yes. You Better Off Dead.
He was the kid,
but you like raisins.
Antagonist.
No, it wasn't. It was the
child in Better Off Dead where they fence with the ski poles.
Yeah,
I forget what his
sorry,
name
I
was.
blew up your mom. I love that movie. But yeah, he was a creeper. And I'm not going to, for everything that anybody said about him, there was very little nice about it because he was very overbearing with those kids. Child actor, you'd think he would have known better, but whatever. So I'm not ever.
Well, sometimes we forward
the abuse. Yes, that's true.
Well, that brings me back around to another point I wanted to make, which is so much. Okay, I mean, a lot of this has become sort of like internet innuendo. Mm-hmm. Just like, remember when everybody loved Elon Musk and everybody assumed he was a genius just because the media said he was a genius and he was going to save the planet and all this stuff. And I fell into it too. I was just like, okay, Elon Musk.
Remember that?
I always thought he was.
I always thought he was an asshole.
Yeah.
Well, remember when he was on the Avengers and he's like, look, the real life Tony Stark and that kind of thing.
Oh my God, he was in that? How did I not?
Yeah, I was in the second one.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Maybe because I blocked it out.
Is that the same thing has happened? And now, of course, Elon is exposed as the true prick he really is.
That he is.
White supremacist.
Absolutely.
Well, so that same mechanism is at work here in the Stanley versus Shelley thing, is because there's been this great kind of media assumption and re-echoing and echoing about this myth. And it all comes back to, if you look at all, and I've done this, I've read all the books, I've read every magazine article, I do this a lot. And if you look at those things where you talk about how Stanley was so mean to Shelley, it's very self-referential. What it is like, you will have a magazine article that refers to another magazine article. So you go to the other magazine article, and you'll have that magazine article refer to another article. And so it becomes this like circular, you're trying to track it down to its source. Like, where is this? Where is this coming from? And it all comes from the 30-minute behind the scenes making of The Shining, which was ironically shot by Stanley Kubrick's daughter. And Stanley had full control over, like I was saying about the PR, he had full control over like what actually went in that little documentary and what got left out. And just as you were saying, Elizabeth, about you can't trust these documentarians, what is shown in that documentary that all of these media assumptions circle back to is Stanley yelling at Shelley. And that he did do that. But the thing is, there was a lot of love that wasn't shown. It's an incomplete picture. Like, just like this on this podcast, I could take the audio record and edit it and make me look like a genius and make you guys look like,
it would be so
imbeciles.
Spot on.
Oh, well, yeah.
And vice versa. I could edit it to make me look like an idiot or a white supremacist or whatever, and make you guys look amazing. So you have to understand the nature of these documents. They're just decisions made by a storyteller in the time. And there was some friction, but you know what? There's friction on every film set I've ever been on.
I mean, I haven't thought of an office in which I haven't yelled at someone and someone yelled back at me.
It happens.
So, yeah. I mean,
it happens.
When you're working with other people, emotions come into play. And when emotions come into play, then you display them in some way. That's
right. Especially when there's like $1 million at stake, And so it is a very charged atmosphere. Well, but Shelley herself has gone on record of saying, I love Stanley. Stanley, it was a hard shoot. I don't want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it. And so I just wanted to take the time to kind of revisit this apocryphal rumor that it's unwatchable now because Shelley's pain is right there. I mean, we have to remember, Shelley started out as a model. Shelley was not like a Juilliard trained artist. I mean, she's a fabulous actor, perfect for the role, did a great job. But let's just have a mind experiment and put, like, say, Meryl Streep in that role for a second. Meryl Streep is a classically trained actor. She does have those psychological tools at her disposal to bring the emotion, and then when it's done, she can let that emotion go because that's her craft. And I think that if somebody with more training had been in that role, she would have been able to handle the stresses better than Shelley did. And so that's my overall point, is just that they were actually friends. They were friends.
Well, I think you've convinced me that Stanley Kubrick is actually a human being and probably has flaws, but is ultimately a person who was trying to do a job and got the job done.
And I know that I know Jack Nicholson had suggested, so he's the reason why Scatman Crothers was cast in the role, because I forget who.
Because I was trying to figure out why.
Yeah, and I can't remember who they were originally wanting. Honestly, I read it and then my brain went like that. So
I think it was Slim Whitman.
Yes, actually. It was. It was Slim Whitman. But he suggested Jessica Lange as Wendy. And now, book-wise, yes.
Yeah.
Because she would have had that bubbly, the characterization of the book Wendy. I get where they went with Shelley, but yes, Jessica Lange could have pulled off that psychological and not be able, and be able to let it go. I would not, and again, I'm not classically trained. I've just done community theater. I would have a hard time letting it go if somebody did that to me, to try to get me to bring those emotions out. I don't deal well with that shit, and I hang on to it. But also, the thing I noticed, and which makes a lot of sense when you start to delve into Stanley Kubrick, is and I'm going to throw this word out there. I hate it because it's no longer a diagnosis, but he was diagnosed with Asperger's. It's not a diagnosis anymore. He had high functioning autism. So that is
Kubrick.
Yes, Kubrick, and so that
I wouldn't argue with that. I think that's probably, he's somewhere on the spectrum, definitely.
Definitely, and that would cause his perfectionism. That would be his why he's so focused on it.
Sure.
Knock knock. Here we are. And again, I don't like that. I don't like to use Asperger's because, again, it's no longer a diagnosis, and Asperger was a massacring Nazi. So we don't talk about that.
Sure.
But he also was, and this is where I'm going to have a hang up. He was known to be a follow social Darwinism. And everything,
Stanley?
Yes. For when I was looking him up online, they said he was a fan of social Darwinism. There were a few sites that mentioned that. And then I had to go and look into what social Darwinism is and what my interpretation, and I could be wrong. And again, point it out if I am, let me know. I need to learn. And the only way I'll learn is if you point it out, is I saw supremacy. Social Darwinism equals supremacy of some form. So that's the way I read it when I was reading the definitions, was they believe in the weeding out of the weaker in ability, in
You're
race.
talking about something like eugenics.
Kind of like eugenics. So that's what I got. That was the impression I got when I was reading the definitions.
I think a lot of people fall into the trap, the eugenicist trap, is the idea that if we make people, better able to withstand illnesses and things like that. But the point of humanity isn't perfection. The point of humanity is our flaws. Anyone who's watched Star Trek knows this. Mm-hmm. Our flaws are what make us great. Our flaws and our diversity are what make us human.
Yeah.
If you're going to take that away, you have that already. It's called a robot. And you can just make robots.
True.
And you don't have to worry about that anymore. White supremacy, eugenicists, any of that stuff is a human failing, not a human right.
When I first saw the word social Darwinism, I flashed back to when I lived in Texas and my friend Kelly was telling me about the Darwin Awards for the first time. And I'm going, I'm reading this thinking, oh, hell yeah, social Darwinism, weed out the stupid. But that wasn't the... I'm all for weeding out the stupid, but
Yeah,
but I don't.
right.
But is this another issue of circular self-referencing?
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to take issue with that. Stanley was Jewish. Stanley grew up. He's Jewish.
And I'm not saying that this was true. I'm saying that this is what was referenced towards him. That he was a fan of multiple times on like different websites. I saw this. I was like. But to call it social Darwinism like I said, and you read the definition of it, to me is what it smacked of supremacy, and which did not make sense to me.
He's definitely not a supremacist. I mean, he famously put like half a decade into a movie that never happened called the Aryan Papers. Mm-hmm. And the reason, and it was basically about the Holocaust. It was about the Jewish experience of World War II. And he abandoned it for two reasons. One, Spielberg came out with Schindler's List. Mm-hmm. And so he felt like Spielberg had kind of stolen the thunder of that moment. He wasn't like, why tell the story? Because Spielberg already did such a good job of it. And secondly, it depressed him so much that he didn't feel like he could fit the subject of the Holocaust into a 2-hour film. But my point is that, again, it comes from, his intention of making that movie was to show the horror of the Holocaust and the horror of this, of man's inhumanity to man. So I will bet everything I have that he was not a eugenicist and he was not a supremacist. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of racial undertones to his work in support of other races. So yeah, no, I don't buy that at all. That's another.
And again, I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying, and if somebody can explain the social Darwinism to me, that where it doesn't smack of supremacy.
No, I think that's pretty spot on as far as that. But I think what they're probably referencing could be a misinterpretation of when he is trying to define that film, the work he was trying to do. it's entirely possible they took parts of it and just misconstrued it or purposely misinterpreted it so that it seemed like you said, I can edit anything and make you look bad.
Or maybe even taking the lines that Jack has in The Shining and maybe saying, well, Kubrick allowed that to be said in his movie, so he must be a supremacist, not taking into fact that it had nothing to do with Kubrick. It had to do with the lines that he that for the character.
I think unless you get a direct quote of some kind or a direct response like he supported this with his money, I think that is something we can probably discount.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you look at an older movie of Stanley's, which is called, oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on it. Had Kirk Douglas in it, black and white film about the war. About World War I. It's called Paths of Glory.
Oh, yes.
So the very end of that movie is when the German soldiers are in this, they've overtaken a town and they've gotten this, they're all in a bar. They're all drinking in a bar and being rowdy. And they make this young girl come out on stage and sing a song for them. And she's forced into doing it. She doesn't want to do it. She's occupied it now. And she sings and the men are drinking and rowdy and they're catcalling her and hooting. And then as the song goes on, she sings so beautifully and so plaintively that their humanity is awoken and they start crying. And the movie basically ends with this woman who actually becomes Stanley Kubrick's wife, Christiane Kubrick, in real life. She awakens their humanity, and that's the end of the movie. And so this is a filmmaker who is deeply, deeply obsessed with humanity. You can even look at Clockwork Orange and look at how the deep message there is like, no matter how awful a person is, if you program them, you've taken away their humanity. So it's better to let the person have his humanity and be a sociopath with humanity than this Clockwork Orange, so to speak. But here's one thing I think it's important to say. In all of my scholarship and all of my research, there is one thing Stanley did that was a complete dick move to Shelley. This is true. Now, this is a fact. This is in his biography. Can you imagine what it is? He pulled an absolute dick move on Shelley, which I find personally indefensible, but I think it's important to bring it up just to have both sides. Can you imagine what it is?
No clue.
What he did was on the set of The Shining, he wanted Wendy and Shelley, the character Wendy and the actor Shelley, to portray isolation. So he actually had a meeting with his team about maybe some people could be nicer to her and then other people be not so nice to her. And basically, it is emotional manipulation. It really is.
I would break down.
Where some people that she quote unquote had a hard time. Mm-hmm. Well, that was planned because they wanted her to feel isolated, and they even went so far as to, in a minor way, not any craziness, but in a minor way, some of the crew were not so nice to her and just didn't give her that affection. And then other crew were told, you guys be nice to her so we can create this sort of in-group, out-group feeling. That actually did happen. That is a fact. It's in his biography. So that's my one criticism of Stanley is he was a total dick at that point. He really did do that.
So as somebody who was bullied profusely as a child, that would really fuck with me hard.
Totally, yeah. It's not, I mean, nowadays it would be seen as like emotional cruelty.
Oh, yeah.
And it really was.
And one thing I noticed with Kubrick's movies, and I am in no way a scholar of Kubrick, but what I have never enjoyed his movies, but there's a reason why. I feel like his movies are intentional to make you uncomfortable, to make you think about the situations that he is portraying in his films. And if you are comfortable with his films, you might be a psychopath. You might have a psychological issue if you, I'm sorry, if you watch Clockwork Orange and you go, oh yeah, that is beautiful, and you don't walk away with some type of ick feeling inside of you, that might be, you might be a problem. Yeah, don't make that face at me. You
I am not a psychopath.
I mean, I think you might.
No, I didn't find.
You can appreciate and like. Well, Polly loves The Shining. You can love the movie, but you have to look at you have so far, and told us that there are parts that make you uncomfortable, and it should feel that way because that makes you human.
But I think that the difference is you will find parts like in this movie specifically, The Shining. You will find the parts that make you uncomfortable, and it won't be the same as everyone else's.
Oh, definitely.
My parts are not the supernatural. The supernatural means nothing. The blood means nothing. The ghost means nothing. None of that affects me at all. Even as a child, none of that affected me. What affected me was the family dynamic. Mm-hmm. And when Jack is going after, Shelley, that's not near as traumatic to me as when he called his son to sit down with him.
That's a creepy scene.
That scared the shit out of me as a child because there's nothing worse than a father who's abusive who is calm.
That's right.
And when he calmly asks you to come over, it's a trap, and you know it's a trap. I've been there. I know that trap.
Danny knew it too because he paused.
It freaked me out when I saw it when I was a child. It freaked me out when I saw it today.
Totally.
My uncomfortable parts are, and it's not because of my love of Shelley, but it's the mom. And it is being a mom and protecting my children as hard as I had to when they were younger to keep. I mean, I was in a more of a neglectful situation, and not so much of a physical abuse, but definitely a neglectful relationship. But the people around us were not always the best, and I was always trying to protect them from those people. And it's like it's like herding cats. And it's funny that I go into education later in life and it's the same thing. I'm herding cats. But when you've got, you've three children going in 3 different directions and you can't protect them to the extent that you want to. And she's got one child. And all I can put is putting myself in that situation. I can protect this one, but then that one's over there and I can't get to that one quick enough. And how do I keep everybody together and quiet? How do we stay quiet? I'm thinking of all of the scenarios in that movie and how I would deal with it if it was me and my 3 children and then they were those ages. That's where I have the uncomfortable and fucked up feelings of, I don't like this. I don't want to continue this because I can't think about those worse situations.
Well, like in this movie, when you get to those points of the silence, it's screaming at you. Like the silence literally screams at you, and it makes you, I wouldn't say it's uncomfortable. What it does is it makes you too aware. It makes you very aware of the vastness, those huge hallways, huge rooms. And then you get into the hallways where they live, and it's claustrophobic.
That's right.
So you get all of these ups and downs. It's almost like Kubrick is twisting you in a knot the whole time with the scenery and with the sound or the lack of sound.
And then when he hits you with The Shining, that sound, like, so when Danny and Scatman have that moment. And then later on, when he has the moment again, when he realizes that there's trouble at the Overlook, that high-pitched humming sound, I said to Beth, I'm like, I'm going to have an anxiety attack. This is going to cause me, the sound alone is going to, that feeling in your chest. It's sound is so powerful.
It is.
And we don't understand it. And go back to my what I do for a living, it's important that sound in my classroom is at a certain level, and whether it can't be quiet. It cannot be quiet. There has to be something going. So we play certain songs, we play certain videos in the background, and even if it's just jellyfish floating and just random ambionic, whatever the word is, sound going on in the background, it's okay. but we can't have loud, spiky sounds. One of the videos we played, it was a great visual, but the sound was coming through tinny, and it was like making me kind of like cringe. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is it doing for the kids? And there was somebody was working on something across the street, and the hum was driving me insane. So I know that and I only have ADD. I might have autism too. I don't know. I'm looking at it. I had a professor who said you have to have a touch of the tism to work with this population. So I've always kind of kept that in my mind. But
touch of the tism.
I know, yeah.
That's hilarious.
So I mean, and I love my kiddos. I think they're amazing. But yeah, if I'm bothered by it, and I know I'm not severe, how do they feel? And I have one with cochlear implants, and that's got to be even worse. So sound in movies, and that sound particularly, has always been, and I'm always very aware of underscores, and when a movie has that silence. Heck, even in our damn video game, we're both like, oh my God, the music changed. Something's coming, the music changed. We're very aware of.
Well, something else too, like you mentioned during our rewatch, that it was snowing outside, but it was still light outside.
It was very bright out.
But for me, what that signified to me when I saw it, when I was watching it and you said that, I'm like, that's worse. That's worse than it being dark and snowy, because it is like being in a desert and having the oasis effect.
Oh, yeah.
Where you see the mirage of water, but it's not actual water. You're seeing the sun, but you can't use it. You can't go out into it. You cannot feel it. You can see it, but it's just too distant for you.
Yeah.
You are still completely isolated within those scenes. You are stuck there. You're stuck inside. There is no way out. And it doesn't matter that the vastness of that hall that you're in is vast, because the claustrophobia is just a hallway away.
Yep.
So there's no way to escape this. And cabin fever doesn't require a small cabin. All it requires is you being trapped in your own mind.
So we also agreed that if given the opportunity, we could totally live in a hotel.
We're introverts.
We are introverts.
Yeah,
Give me internet
too.
access, and even that's questionable. Give me some books. I mean, I'm okay.
I would still
paint
type
supplies.
exactly what he typed, but for fun.
But for fun, yeah. No, I would totally. I'd give me some painting, some crochet, and some books, and I could spend a whole year there. But I will complain about this one environmental factor, because you mentioned the snow. The snow at the end was not snow. It was salt and styrofoam. And I am pretty sure that they're still finding bits of styrofoam up there to this day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that set was pretty toxic for people too. And that's one of the reasons why, if you remember in the movie, the one time Stanley does, in the documentary, when he yells at Shelley, she's trying to get out the door and he's like, come on, there's a whole world. He said, we're dying out here. And it was true. It's like this toxic stuff is just raining from the sky.
God.
And he's like, let's get the shot so we can get out of here,
Yeah.
But let me I want to bring it back to a point that Beth was making. The scene with the dad and the little boy that's so horrible on the bed, that intimate, quiet, dreadful scene is at the heart of what the dark secret heart of the movie is. Can you guys guess what that dark secret heart of the movie? Like there's a secret at the center of The Shining that a lot of people don't catch on to. And I wonder if you guys caught it. And I guarantee you the minute I say it, you're going to be like, I knew it. Here it is. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jack sexually abused Danny. That's what happened. And I will build it up. I'll give you proof of it. But the dark heart of the movie has sexual abuse at its heart by a dad onto his own child. For instance, let's look at the symbolism of bears in the movie. Okay, where do we see bears in The Shining?
Pooh Bear in the back.
There's one point where he's got a Pooh Bear. Remember the horrible, infamous bear man fellatio scene?
Yes.
That's another bear. There's a bear rug. there's a bear in Danny's bedroom. If you look at his bedroom, the above the bed, there's a bear painting. And what's really fascinating is if you get into looking at shapes and colors, and I wish I had a way to show this visually to the people who are listening to this, but the bear in Danny's bed, the Pooh Bear kind of guy, is if you look very, very carefully, his eyes are the exact same picture of the shape and everything as the eyes above the elevator that leaks all the blood. And I can prove it. I'll show it to you. I've got it. I actually took the time to download it.
And honestly, the colors of the rug are the same colors of a Pooh Bear because it's got the red and the yellowish. That's it. And so what happens, and another clue, so we've got all these references to a bear. It's like, who cares? It's a bear, right? Doesn't he wear a bear sweater at one point? A sweater with a bear on it? I think he...
No, there's a Mickey Mouse.
There's a Mickey Mouse.
There's a Apollo rocket.
Maybe it was in the...
There's like a Western motif one.
It might have been in the made-for-TV movie one.
Or a winter motif one.
But
let's take a... I mean, I'm going to show you this. It's all I can do. Can you see that little picture on there? See Danny with the bear? See how the eyes of the bear are the same eyes on top of the
if you want to, if you will send me that photo, I can link it. Yeah, we can put it into the show notes.
Okay, let me. I will do that. I will send these. Let me show you this real quick. So this is the famous. Oh crap! Sorry, I'm dealing with technology here.
It's me on the daily at work.
Is it really?
Oh yeah, because nothing ever works right. Smartboard, whatever.
So another one. See, if you look closely at the elevator,
it does look like eyes. I've always thought
eyes.
That. Yeah,
it's eyes. It's a face. It's there's a term for it, pareidolia. Have you ever heard of that? Where people see faces in various things.
I do it all
Look
the
at its crazy eyes.
Yes.
I mean, those are hard. If you recognize that as a face, that's a crazy face. And that's a really creepy face.
Scared eyes. I would say those are scared eyes.
It's horrible. There's so many more. And of course, the blood of the elevator, the red color of the elevator. And you can go into this. Like, this is a really fascinating document. I'll have to show it to you. But basically, when you look, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to make a visual medium here.
That's okay.
It's okay. We're gonna post these so they can look at them in the show notes.
Yeah.
While they're listening to
and Beth is a wonder at editing anything we don't want.
So here's the picture of Danny. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. In the bathroom.
Yeah.
See
yes.
Okay. Look at how he's positioned. Yeah. And look at the lamp above the window. And now we go to, and I should have just sent you these, honestly.
That's okay.
That's fine.
But, shiny bathroom. Okay, now here's the bathroom and the overlook. See, the color green is right there. The color green was in Danny's room.
Yeah.
In the bathroom. And now we're full on green. But now we go to the bear. Where's the bear?
I think that's the difference between the book and the movie is that the book, while it goes through the psychological struggles, intimately through their minds, what you're having to get through the film is the portrayal by the visual aspect.
Oh yeah,
you're having to
film is a visual language, so he's making visual. Like, look at the carpet in the room.
Oh yeah. You got the
Look
green.
at how phallic that is. Look at the phallic.
And I did read somewhere that with Wendy, when she kind of like reaches back, like, and she gets the bat, so that's like beating him with the phallic symbol, and the same thing with the stabbing him in the hand had to do with it was like a sexual
not touching or
and so they were saying there was a lot of I can't think of the word.
I never caught any of that. As far as like a sexual nature?
I guess because I wasn't really looking. I really wasn't looking.
If you notice, okay, I'm going to have to do this backwards. See, this is where Danny is in the bathroom. But look at how the bear guy is positioned. It's exactly like Danny. It's a visual echo. You see that?
Yeah.
And you see the, let let me see. I'm having to do this backwards. I should have done it. But see, if you look at Danny in the bathroom here, you can see the visual echo of the green over here. And so we're having all these visual callbacks and these visual clues. And here is the biggest clue of all about Jack and his sexual appetites. And it is right here. And a lot of people joke about this, but at one point in the movie, for some bizarre reason, Jack is reading a Playgirl magazine.
Huh.
And you wonder, what the fuck is making Jack read a Playgirl magazine? But if you look at the cover, on the cover, there's a mention of incest. And so what Stanley is trying to do here is he's planting these cute clues,
and they're almost like subconscious clues. Like
that's it.
He likes those subliminal messages.
That's exactly what it is. It's it's widely understood that Stanley researched like psychological tricks of advertising and how advertisements and commercials emotionally manipulate you, and you don't even know you're being manipulated.
Yeah, they'll blip stuff in. Yeah,
that's it. And so he put these little emotional clues in there, knowing that your conscious mind would never see it, but your unconscious mind would see it and process it.
And once again, it's that uncomfortable feeling.
So one of the things that I did not pick up on that aspect, but one of the things I think I attributed to a different type of abuse, of physical abuse, of like, being beaten or even psychologically of being made to feel like you're less than, is that the isolation of Danny, even within the family dynamic, that when you're talking about Danny being abused, I look at it as a physical abuse of being beaten, and that's what he's afraid of. But that makes that scene even more chilling, knowing that the intention is he could be either sexually abused or beaten or psychologically shut out. And any of those are horrifying for a child, but to think that now we're talking about abuse roulette. At that moment is an abuse roulette.
So yeah, how old is how old is the character? Not the actor, but how old is the character in the movie? He's
like 5.
5. Okay, he's a big 5-year-old. But so this is my hang up, and this is something I caught, but I didn't say out loud. Was I call my mom mommy. I have called her mommy. Even I'm 50 years old, I still call her mommy. But when I'm talking to her, I'm like, mommy this. So I had a friend who used to tease me about that. She called her mom mother. Her mom was very abusive. She was an alcoholic. She had problems, very abusive. Called her mother. And they had a great relationship when I knew them, but as a child, they did not. And I thought that was weird. I thought it was very formal. Now, my children call me all sorts of things because they just think they're funny. And none of them call me mommy. But I couldn't understand. I work with little children, and every one of them, it's mommy and daddy, mommy and daddy. He never says daddy. He's sitting on his lap. He doesn't say daddy. He says dad, which is not something a 5-year-old does with their dad. They don't say dad. They say daddy.
That's
because
true.
They're little.
That is true.
When Jack says, I love you, Danny does not. And I don't know a single 5-year-old that if you say, I love you, if they're their parent, that they're not going to say it back unless there's a reason. I mean, hell, I don't know these kids that I work with now for maybe 2 weeks because I just moved into that classroom. But I know if I say, hey, so-and-so, I love you, I love you, they're going to say it back. I get hugs already. So, I mean,
no, but it's true, though. I would not have said it back to my dad.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I definitely wouldn't.
And did you call him daddy?
No, I called him dad. Yeah. Stay the hell away from him.
And I think that's a thing.
You don't stay in the same room. You stay in another room. You go as far away as possible.
And I mean, this is nothing I know of like that. Again, nothing rock solid. But
that explains why Danny spends so much time
with mom,
with this trike, as far away as possible in other places.
Yeah, and the fact that he asked if he could go get his truck. I mean, no little child that I know of would ask to go get their truck. They would have come in.
I would have.
They would have come in maybe quietly because she did say Dad's sleeping. He would have come in quietly, but would have just ran straight to their room, got their truck, and left.
But I completely understand his his motivation there, I completely understood.
Oh, and I get that.
I would have snuck in as quietly as possible, got it, and got the hell out because you absolutely don't wake your abuser.
Oh, yeah, but the fact that he was sitting there, and even sitting there, you would have gotten a, "Hi, Daddy," and then run through, got the truck, and ran back out.
Right.
But that was a child who was abused and knew that I can't do that.
Well, the people, I mean, and this is not my scholarship. This is other people. There's a really great YouTuber called Rob Ager who has broken all this down. And a lot of what I'm saying is basically just going back to his
If you'll send me that
research.
link, I can link
Yeah, we can link it, yeah.
Rob Ager, Ager. And that moment when he makes Danny sit on his lap, if you break it down and take the story apart, it was right after that Danny was abused. So I think you guys are really perceptive in pinpointing that moment as one of the darkest in the film, because it really is. Mm-hmm. It really is. That's when the abuse, like if we hadn't cut away, we would have seen some sexual abuse taking place right after that. So, I mean, and these are all just, this is art. So my version of the movie is different from Beth's version. It's, we all have our own unique reaction to this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And, and nobody's right or wrong. This is just like you say in your podcast, this is how we feel about it.
And it's the legitimacy of any art is it's not supposed to be subjective. No, it is. It's subjective, not objective, right?
That's correct.
Yes, yeah. I always get them backwards. But yeah, it's because it's individual, and it's
not math.
Yeah, exactly. There's no exact science in how you feel about something.
That's right.
And it should. And again, like I said, if you are 100% comfortable with everything you see in a Stanley Kubrick movie, you might need to go see a therapist. No offense, but
you will never try to go see a therapist because you won't. You're not of that persuasion.
If you know somebody who is 100%, okay, I was married to somebody who watched, and you mentioned Quentin Tarantino earlier, and I do not like Quentin Tarantino movies. So here's my trauma is because my ex would watch Natural Born Killers and Pulp Fiction on a loop over and over again. Now, I am not saying that Tarantino is a bad director, whatever. I cannot stomach his movies because, again, it was a neglectful relationship, but also a bad, I just can't, I relate them too much to that time. So, again, everything is subjective.
So, Polly, I know that you've seen this movie probably dozens, hundreds of times, but has anything changed for you emotionally from the first time you saw it to the last time you've seen it?
Well, it's gotten deeper. I mean, as I've matured and grown older, I've learned more about it. I grew to love it, and it is a harrowing movie. I don't love being full of dread, but I love the artistry and the craft, and I love the puzzle aspect of things that Kubrick does. I mean, he's interested in puzzles, and he's interested in, the mechanics of storytelling of the moment Jack is overlooking the maze, and you get the idea that that his mind is a maze and the overlook itself is a maze. And you see these levels upon levels, the micro of the maze and the macro of the hotel and the macro above that of the horrendous world. And so that kind of stuff has deepened for me. And the fact that the movie is ultimately a major indictment of male toxicity, that toxic masculinity, that rage, taking it out on your wife, taking it out on your child. I mean, it's an indictment of that. And so I've just really grown more appreciative of it. I've become a real Kubrick fan because I see him as one of the great humanists of film. For instance, in Full Metal Jacket, the movie he made directly after The Shining, the whole movie is an indictment of war, man trying to kill man, and specifically the military industrial complex where they take young men, turn them into robotic killers, which is what happened in the first half of the movie, when the guy short circuited and started killing everybody and killed himself, killed the drill sergeant, and then the movie shifts, and toward the end of that movie we have these hardened Marines who are all taken apart by a 12-year-old girl with zero training whatsoever. And so if you look at the whole point of the movie, it's indicting man's inhumanity to man, which is kind of a humanist statement.
Which is what Joker says, right? So,
oh my God,
it is. That's right. That's right.
So,
and of course, you've got Jung and Carl Jung, and you've got Sigmund Freud. His ideas are in here. Yeah. Fairy tales. We talked about Diane Johnson early on, and she's an academic, and she brought in like, what is horror? Like, what is a horror? And they went back to like the 1700s and fairy tales, and you see Bugs Bunny in the movie, and there's all these layers. Like, the Gothic story happens on a dark and stormy night, but this movie, as you guys mentioned, happens on a bright sunny day. So they're like inverting that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but the snow drifts of 13 feet. So it's going to be very isolating.
Yeah. So there's layers upon layers upon layers. We haven't even talked about the Jewish Holocaust, which is referenced, the Native American Holocaust, which is referenced, and they talk about The Shining as built upon an Indian burial ground. Well, that's what the whole United States is.
Oh yeah,
our whole country is an Indian fucking burial ground.
Immigrants based on
that's the point of almost every American horror film is you're here in horror because you created it.
That's right. That's right. And so it becomes an indictment upon American hegemony of this white male refusal to have respect for anything other than white males, and so, your question asked, has my emotional response changed? And it's gotten deeper and deeper and deeper. It's been one of the great artistic relationships I've had in my life, and actually I got to become friends with some of Kubrick's collaborators who loved him, by the way, who didn't go, oh, this guy's an asshole. They're Kubrick supporters all the way, and they worked with him for years. And it's been a great thing for me to kind of get in their circle just a little bit, so.
And you're a horror writer. So
horror-ish. I write dark fantasy, right, but I like horror a lot.
So your bent is to go into that realm of the psychological, into the area of the fantastical, but it's ultimately dark in some way. Do you try to find the humanity in
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, horror is at its core is you have normality, and then you have a destabilization of that normality. And then hopefully you get a return to normality at the end. Think of Friday the 13th. You have the kids having a good time. Maniac comes in. Either he's killed or he's not. And at the end, either order is restored or it's not. And if it is, then it's a hopeful movie. If it's not, then it's like, ooh, that ending was chilling. So if you look at patterns of, and Beth, here we get into your pattern recognition. And if you look at patterns of stability and what is ordinary and what is the other and what is an outsider and who's an outsider, there's some real interesting questions that get asked and answered in those types of discussions, I think.
I think that one of the things where we're trying to find the humanity in the film, which would be Wendy saving her son, but we have instances of it throughout, and one of those is when Dick, or Scatman Crothers, he makes all this effort. He creates.
My goodness, he does.
He creates the
escape.
He creates a situation in which they can escape because he distracts them unknowingly, but he does because he goes to such lengths, and
he doesn't even get the satisfaction of seeing them.
Well, when they talk about having The Shining, you can say it's the supernatural aspect, but I honestly think that it's more about the human aspect. When you are so human at your core that you care deeply about the people around you, I think that is The Shining. And he cared about these people. He didn't know them.
He didn't know them from anybody, really.
He was that neighbor across the street that keeps your dad from beating you to death.
No, he was. And that's another argument against, Kubrick is not a racist. I mean, the ultimate good guy in the movie is a black guy. You know what I mean? So he actually he's putting this idea forth that Scatman is the savior. Interestingly enough, in early drafts of the Shining screenplay, they had where Scatman would come in, would get taken over by the hotel and himself become a maniac and go through the hotel killing everybody.
I'm glad that they didn't do that.
Yeah.
They threw that out.
But
they had that.
Yeah.
I think you have to come to those, you have to hit those bad ideas or the ideas that don't play out, that don't make sense so that you can find the true story. I think sometimes you're what you write is just, it's like going through Memphis at rush hour. It's a bad idea, but you have to do it to get to your ultimate destination.
Oh yeah, because that's how you.
Because it's the journey. The journey matters. The journey is part of it. Being frustrated in traffic, I tell you, when you get home, you feel so much better being home. The journey makes the difference.
Yep.
I think for me, how I feel about it now compared to when I first saw the movie. Again, I've aged since then. I've grown. I've learned. And I'm not going to lie. We were dreading this because this is not one of our favorites.
Oh,
but
sorry.
no, not in a bad way though. Not in a bad way. It was just like, more of a, kind of a thing.
It's not our favorites for different reasons. Mine is, I don't ever see the horror in it. I see the abuse.
And I just have my...
And I relive it. As an autistic person, I relive my memories pretty close to the surface. So it's not a visualization of my memory. It is a reliving of the memory.
Sure.
So when I watch this movie, I'm reliving things that happened to me in relation to this movie. Although now you've added some real layers that I'm going to have to process.
But I want to thank you, though, because you have made me look at this movie in a different perspective than I looked at it before. So while I will no longer say that I hate The Shining, because usually that was my go-to. And someone said, oh, yeah, The Shining. I'm like, I hate The Shining. I love the book. I hate the movie. But I won't say that. And I'm not going to, poop on Stanley Kubrick the way I used to. I have a new perspective of it. Will I watch the movie actively again? Probably not, because there's so many issues that I do have with it for various reasons.
Right.
But I do appreciate, I love to learn and I love to look at things from a different perspective because that is how we learn as humans. I always tell people, if you don't tell me I'm doing something wrong, I will never learn how to be better. And this is one of those situations. I had an idea, a perspective. And while I did find information, the information only solidified my beliefs, but also made me question a few things because, again, I didn't necessarily believe the Kubrick stuff. But I do appreciate learning about the different nuances and the different ways that this movie can be perceived.
Well, if if you think about it, if you get to the ultimate message of it, it's really about trauma.
Definitely.
Where it's about the chain of trauma, the way fathers visit trauma upon their children, and the chain of trauma that it goes back to what you guys were saying, that abusers abuse. And in the book, Stephen King had the time to go into Jack's own father, who was an abuser. And we go into this backstory, and it's really fascinating how it all plays out, but it ultimately comes down to the subject is trauma and the horrible abuses that we put upon each other due to this trauma, reliving this trauma. So necessarily it has to be a traumatic movie to get that message across,
And we can bring it back around. Did pass the Castellini test.
It does. I mean,
I'm surprised.
We're
That's
usually
really cool.
surprised. We're usually surprised by when it does pass, because sometimes it seems so obvious that it's going to fail. But throughout the film, you've convinced us, because it does fit, that all three of these steps, but also our own intuition of whether or not this passes as a feminist film we're talking about equity, that there's representation. And yes, while it's very cis, heteronormative, and very abusive in a lot of ways, but this film is supposed to delve into the uncomfortable. the point of it is that you're delving into the things that are, the horror was inside of us all along.
That's
you
right.
find those pieces of yourself in the film and you apply it. So that makes sense.
It was coming from inside the house the whole entire time.
Exactly. It was inside the hotel.
Also, we are kind of also jaded by the fact that we have a lot of pop culture references towards The Shining that we had to like cull ourselves from saying. Bob's Burgers does a great episode with the Koopy Koopy thing, and all the oh my god, that
there are a lot of homages.
We kept
to-
saying the shinin.
Totally.
You got the shinin.
The shinin.
Yeah, The Simpsons. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
we were doing that through the whole thing because we can never watch a movie. I'm playing a game on my phone and we're making jokes because that's how I have to. For again, ADD. That's how
get
I
it,
watch
I
a
get it.
movie. So this was actually very enjoyable to sit here and have this conversation.
Oh, well, good.
Yes,
Well,
we're-
then, it speaks to a movie's greatness where it has infiltrated the culture. Now, everybody knows about it. Everybody knows even the references to it. Even if you haven't seen the movie,
Oh, yeah.
you still get those references,
Oh, yeah,
So
definitely.
it's become almost ubiquitous now,
I love a good pop culture reference. So anything that
Yes.
that harkens back to that is me. But you are very much welcome anytime you want because this was good. This was fun.
Oh, well, thank you.
And
Well, this is the one
this.
subject that I know a lot about, and maybe more than most people. I think the only people who know more than me are like his actual biographers and stuff who actually put the books out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm too lazy for that. But I've studied it. I've studied it for a long time, so I know what's going on there.
So, Polly, where can everyone find you? Where can they get in contact with you, buy your books, see your movies?
My books are out there. My website is pollyschatel.com, and that is POLLYSCHATTEL.com. And I'm on BlueSky. I'm out there. I'd love to talk with people who have heard this and are fans of yours, because I'm a big fan of you guys, and I love anybody who's a fan of you guys.
Well,
so.
we're big fans of you, Polly, and we
definitely.
thank you so much for being here. You're an awesome friend. You're great at what you do, and you're very entertaining when you speak about the things that you love. You can feel that love come through.
Oh, well,
and
thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
So for our next episode, here are the clues that I'm going to give you. Unfortunately, I didn't write these down, so this is going to be a fun one for me because I did not write down my clues. This movie has a lot of weird sexual tension and possible OTPs that don't exist. And I'm throwing that out for those of you in the know. If you know, you know. And let's see, what can be another...
Hanging from a bridge.
Hanging from a bridge. So if you can figure that one out, please let us know.
Cool.
Again, I want to thank the great Polly Schattel, who came here to talk about The Shining, a 1980 psychological horror film in which we have learned has so many layers, and Polly has so eloquently put that this movie is about humanity. I'm so glad she shared that with us. Thank you so much for sharing on this emotional journey with us. This has been Once More with Feelings with Beth and Michelle. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and BlueSky at OMWFPod, with our page at oncemorewithfeelings.podbean.com, or send us an email at omwfpod@gmail.com. Take a moment to subscribe and rate us on iTunes.
If you want to watch this movie, you can find it on all the usual suspects. Amazon, Yahoo, Roku. You name it, it's out there.
Dad?
What?
You would never hurt Mom or me, would you?
What do you mean? Did your mother ever say that to you? That I would hurt you?
No, Dad.
Are you sure?
Yes, Dad.